I knew. What the hell was that? That next. Next time you come my way, I know just what to say. Oh, a minute.
Anyway, so here comes Kevin Owens. And this, I'll tell you what, he is a cunning linguist. He is a really smart verbal gymnast. He shut the what's down and got some heat. And they tried to what him, and they got him for a minute, but he whatted himself, and then he got him to listen to what he was saying. And then when he started knocking Austin, they didn't want to hear that from his smart mouth, and it distracted them into booing him like they're supposed to. So he did a good job. And, go ahead.
I thought this was a fantastic promo. I loved it. I thought this may have been the highlight of the entire show. It's too bad that the feud made no sense up to this point. Like, if it was just this promo and this kind of intensity leading into whatever it's going to be, the first appearance of Steve Austin in a ring in a long time, it'd be something, but they bungled the build-up to this so that it made no sense. I guess part of it was they thought they were getting a match, and then they found that they were getting a match. But this promo was the best part of this whole Austin-Owens feud. This promo was great.
Well, and see, part of the thing is, again, we just talked about they've had two guys going after each other with forklifts, and then the same two guys just talk on the program. The great thing about this particular situation they're in is that nothing physical is needed. It would be detrimental to this angle and to the match or the show or the fight or the deal at WrestleMania. If we even saw Steve Austin live in person before this thing happens. So, in this situation, no, you absolutely don't want to have anything physical. No, you absolutely don't want to see one of the participants until the actual event itself. So that means you need a heel that can fucking carry the promo, and that's what he did here. And this time he was serious. And Kevin, I appreciate you listening to the program and my constructive comments last week, and you took some of them to heart, and I appreciate that. Because he basically did the promo I said he ought to do last week, not in the same words, but with the same intention. Now he was serious. Stone Cold Steve Austin, yeah, you were great. That video shows how great you were. But for 19 years, you've been sitting around a sad, beer-drinking shell of your former self, begging to be on people's podcasts, blah, blah, blah. Now we got personal. Now we got serious. And he actually came out and said, well, he didn't come out and say these many words, but he said, you can't whip me today. Piff and toff, I say. And he's going to give Stone Cold Steve Austin the send-off that he deserves, and he's going to drink a filthy beer, even though he hates it because it tastes like whatever, and toast Stone Cold Steve Austin, passing the torch to him as the new Stone Cold and the master of the stunner. Now, that's a go-home promo for the show in a situation like this. And when Austin comes out, and it's the first time we've seen him live, the babies will fly in the air. Even though Kevin Steen, we didn't know he had a lifelong hatred of the state of Texas until 4 weeks ago. So yeah, this was the best part about the whole thing. At this point, everybody just wants to see Steve Austin. I don't know that they would really have cared if they'd have just announced on Raw that, yeah, we called a cab and Steve Austin showed up driving it, so he'll be on WrestleMania. Just any reason. But it would have been nice if there was something really that you could sink your teeth into apart from this manufactured premise. But we will push on, right?
All of a sudden, in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, on Twitter I noticed that a lot of people were sending me the clip of your debut on Monday Night Raw, you and Bobby Heenan embracing in the ring. And then when I went to go through the drive-thru emails, I was surprised to see there were a number of questions about this, and I'm not exactly sure why this is a popular topic again. Do you have any idea?
No, but I've seen the same thing on my Twitter, and it was today. As a matter of fact, I just watched the clip again because you had mentioned the same thing. It's not an anniversary. It was in July. You can tell because I'm sweating like a whore in church. I am just pouring sweat. But it's not an anniversary. It was in July of 1993. There's no newsworthy event that would have been surrounding this particular show or clip or whatever. It just people started passing it around again. And we've talked about it, previously on the program, but it has been a while. And if you aren't subscribing to the Patreon or really doing the deep dive on the YouTube channel, some folks may not have heard all the stories, but I don't know why it's been circulating like this. It's just all of a sudden, past couple of weeks.
Well, like I said, we got a ton of questions and a lot on Twitter, too. So just to sum everything up, let's talk about what you remember about this, what you remember about making the deal to go away.
What I remember about this, like I've just awoken from a coma, and this is, golly, I remember when I hugged Bobby Heenan on national television.
It was a big deal for a number of reasons. You were the guy. I mean, I think I remember in the Observer, the headline was, "Hell is frozen over again."
Lawler froze it first.
That's right. So this was hell freezing over the second time. And you had been pretty vocal about your thoughts about WWF for a number of years. Beyond that, it's a big deal because it is guys who are widely considered 1 and 2 of the greatest managers of all time.
And then there was another part in there in that while they had acknowledged that Jerry Lawler was the king of wrestling in Memphis, they didn't go so far as to actually name the promotion. Smoky Mountain Wrestling was the first time in their modern national TV run that they had acknowledged another promotion and indicated that the Heavenly Bodies were from there and I was from there, and we were doing. Then that led to the Rock and Roll coming in, Smoky Mountain title being defended, just to show that I was getting publicity is what I was getting publicity, son, is what I was doing.
They didn't just acknowledge it, Vince said it, which was really, it's awkward to hear him, oh, he's from Smoky Mountain Wrestling. What do you know about that, mister?
Yeah, well, what in the world? I was just going to talk about this particular interview segment, but since you led with such a sweeping essay question on what led to me, we've told this story recently. They can go to the YouTube. As far as I had been contacted in Knoxville by Bruce Pritchard. I was managing Dr. Tom at the time, and Stan had just retired. Wonderful timing on his part, and Jimmy Del Rey, beautiful timing on his part, had just come from Florida to take his place. And we had sent Bruce a tape, and I've told that story before, etc., with his dad of us, ribbing him, but he played it for other people, apparently. And that is the period of time when Jerry Jarrett was up there and had already brought Lawler, so there was a precedent for freezing hell. But they needed an American spokesperson, as we later phrased it, for Yokozuna. That's when Vince was earnestly wanting to build Lex Luger as the next Hulk Hogan. The conversation, I believe, probably between Bruce and I happened probably the week after the 4th of July when Luger had body slammed Yokozuna, or hip tossed him. It was really just a hip toss on the deck of the Intrepid in the big deal to kick off that SummerSlam 93 angle. So, and I've said this before, with all respect to Mr. Fuji, who was a great wrestler for years and drew huge money out in San Francisco and was tag team champion in the WWF, etc., but you can't make the case he was a good interview for a main event world championship match at WrestleMania for your new project that wants to be the next Hulk Hogan. I mean, my God, the Lincoln Douglas debates couldn't have made Lex Luger the next fucking Hulk Hogan. So that's not even a knock on Fuji, but they needed an interview, and somehow in that exchange I had with Bruce, Vince had actually seen, or somebody had called his attention to a tape of me, and we got to do this. And they knew, Bruce knew, because he'd known me since Houston, that I would not come instead of Smoky Mountain, or I wouldn't come without the Heavenly Bodies or some. That's how they pitched it to me. Bruce called and said, hey, do you and the Bodies want to make some shots? We're short on tag teams. Maybe do it Raw and work with the Steiners at SummerSlam. Oh, all right. New Rick and Scott from WCW. That'd be a great match. I said, can we acknowledge Smoky Mountain Wrestling? Can there be, an acknowledgement here and some type of, oh, yes. And I didn't realize until we got there in Alexandria Bay, New
Good
York.
night.
We told that story here about 6 months ago.
Remember,
about that
if I'm
giant
up.
tin building. They said it's still there. Somebody said it's still a dump. But we're expecting, WWF Monday Night Raw to be in a reasonably modern arena, and it's this fucking exhibition hall in Alexandria Bay out in the gravel parking lot. That was our debut. But when we got there to do our first night to TV, that's when Bruce brought me back to see Vince and Pat Patterson. I forgot to mention the first time that I met Pat Patterson in person when we did our tribute to him the other day. I had met Pat outside the Orange Bowl in Miami after the Great American Bash 1986.
Really?
Yes. Because me and Bobby and Dennis, we weren't on last. I think we were on next to last, and it's the Orange Bowl, and it's not a great neighborhood, so we're rushing to get in the fucking rental car, get the fuck out of Dodge, beat the traffic, right? Not that there was 50,000 people in the Orange Bowl. That was one of the ones that was a little dodgy. There was like 10 or 12,000. But as we're rushing out to the parking lot, try to beat the people, some guy in a fucking frumpy coat and a golf hat and tennis shoes is standing outside, sort of at one of the exits, where you can still see inside the building and the stadium and watch what's going on, but he's outside, right in the breezeway or whatever, on the way out. And he grabs me by the arm. I think it's some fan. I'm like, hey, buddy. He takes the hat off. He says, Jim, it's Pat Patterson. I said, what the fuck? And he had come to check out what was going on. He may have had a residence down there. Almost everybody did. Vince did. Everybody had some place in Florida that they stayed part-time or whatever. But for whatever reason, he was in Miami. He was checking, and he gave me the, shh, don't tell anyone. I said, I won't. He said, I just want to tell you I love you guys. I really enjoy your work. You and the boys, you're fantastic. And I'm not saying this now, right? Because if I really would put myself over, I'd have thought to say this when we were talking about him the other day. But he said, I know you got to go. I just wanted to say hello. Maybe we work together some. That was Pat, right? Maybe we'll work together sometime. He just wanted to let me know as one of the boys that, they liked what we were doing. And this was after we had, talked to Vince that time and decided against going anywhere until his friend had stooged us off for going to New York to have the meeting to begin with.
And beyond you could see why Pat Patterson would love the Midnight Express.
Well, it was like the closest thing to watching him and Stevens, I guess, at that point in time.
In that era, yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's the first time I met him. Anyway, so I went back, and we had met Vince, obviously, earlier in '86 also. But we go back to talk to Vince and Pat in Alexandria Bay, New York at Raw, since I digressed way long ago. And that's when they set me down and said, well, we wondered if you'd mind doing something else for us. Well, what? Of course, yeah. What? And that's when they hit me with the American spokesperson thing for Yokozuna. And they kind of beat around the bush also, because Fuji was a very valued employee and trying to say, he's been with the company forever, and this is the way we started it out, but now we got to do something to really juice up Luger as much as possible in this rivalry, because Vince did legitimately fully intend at that point that Lex Luger would be the guy that beat Yokozuna eventually. Even then, I come to find out he wasn't going to do it at SummerSlam. He was going to stretch it out. But at that point, it wasn't common for them to tell, especially me coming in. I assumed until I found out like a week beforehand that Luger was going to win SummerSlam. Because I thought, with this fucking build, he'll look like a plate full of piss. I even said that one time. He'll look like a plate full of piss if he doesn't. And he didn't, and he did. But I said, okay, and that was the point of it, is Bruce had kind of clued him in that if they pitched me and the Bodies coming up together, acknowledging Smoky Mountain, that then I would agree to do the thing, to come to begin with, and do the thing with Yoko, which is what happened. So then I had only in passing a couple of times had a chance at a couple of hotel lobbies to ever speak to Bobby Heenan before, because we had never worked in the same place. And not only that, but the only time that he ever appeared in Memphis that I was there was the first night with him and Bockwinkel, and I was just a photographer at that point and wasn't, poking around the goddamn, on the debut night of the AWA relationship. And those guys are back there. Jerry Jarrett and Vern Gagne are sitting over the corner. I'm not going to be fucking running around introducing myself to everybody. That's before this handshake business came up. So we never got a chance to work together or even have a long conversation. So as soon as we got together that afternoon in the back of the building, it was the same thing as Percy Pringle, though. It was like we'd known each other, and we could talk about each other and things we had done, because we were such wrestling fans. Of course, Bobby was the first manager I ever saw, the first wrestling TV show I ever saw. I researched many of my repertoire from by just the way to be a chicken shit weasel heel manager. I saw it, how it was done, so I would do things that I would think Bobby would do, even if I'd never seen him do them. Because he was the blueprint, right? But he was such a fan, like Percy was such a fan, that I love the thing you did with the so-and-so. He's seen the TVs or whatever. And also he was just so fucking funny. And hit it off, and there was no... I went back and actually watched this clip because it was 27 years ago in July, so I haven't watched it a ton of times in the last 10 or 15 years, but I watched it since it was on Twitter so much lately and just to discuss it, and it was 4 minutes from start to finish. And the premise of the whole thing was Pat was the guy who would lay stuff out for you on television in those days. Obviously, not every single match, they had some other agents, but I mean the creative, like the promos. This was an interview. So Pat just said, oh, Bobby, when you see Jim coming, because that was still in the days when, and there's some validity to it, I'd never been on WWF television, even though I'd been on national TV for Crockett for years and years. I'd been off that for a couple years, doing Smoky Mountain TV. And also there's the just WWF audience, which in Alexandria Bay, New York, I'll acquiesce to that. There were probably some of those people that had only seen WWF wrestling. So Pat just gave us the gist of it. You know, we'll come up off that of the commercial or wherever we came from, and JC, you start walking to the ring. I can't do Pat's accent through this whole thing now or it'll sound funny. But JC, you start walking to the ring. Bobby, you see him, you get excited. You guys are old friends, because he knew that if Bobby liked me, then Bobby had heat and had been there for years. People would dislike me because I was a heel prick companion of that no-good Bobby Heenan, obviously. Bobby picked up on the same thing, so that's all he had to say. Bobby, you see him, oh, it's my old friend Jimmy, and you jump in the ring, and you do the interview. That's the direction we got for it. And then, you know, basically they didn't want to reveal me as being involved with Yokozuna until the following week. We were taping 2 shows that night. This was the first one, so they had me do the promo about the Heavenly Bodies and issue a challenge to the Steiner brothers for the World Tag title, and that would eventually end up taking place at SummerSlam. And so that was my thing, you know, hey, you're from Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And Bobby, of course, he knew what I was doing. I had my own promotion. I'm trying to get it over down there. It's hard times in wrestling. So he's going to give you that big build. I said, that's right, and we've dominated. And now the only thing that we haven't done is come here and win this title, too, and blah, blah, blah. That was the gist of the whole thing. Issue the challenge for the Steiners. Me and Bobby hug and kiss. We're old compadres. And cut the promo, and in 4 minutes we did it. And we didn't discuss between Bobby and I word for word. So we played off of each other when we get in the ring, and he even stops me at the start. He says, no, you wait, I'm going to talk for a minute, because he really wanted to put me over. Because it wasn't like I was telling him, hey, Bobby, put me over. He wanted to, so he did it. He went into it that way. And then I'm doing the aw shucks thing, because I'm being a heel too. You're too kind. I'm really so modest. And then we get to the meat of the matter, and then we get out of there, and Vince is shocked. And we weren't there for 20 minutes, and we didn't have scripted lines that we were bouncing off of each other. And sometimes we talk over each other, because that's what people do when they're fucking hooting and hollering because they've just run into each other again after a while. There was some flow and some naturalness to it, rather than just this, we're reciting some material here. And since nobody had actually told us back in those days the words to say, even on Raw, that you didn't get that, we did what we would do, and just had and I've said this before, I'm glad they shot me mostly from the waist up, because you're going to be being hugged and put over on national TV by Bobby Heenan. I had a fucking stiffy. It was, you know, I mean, that was, for the childhood wrestling fan in me, can you imagine that? This is the first manager that I saw on the first wrestling show I saw. And now, wait a minute, 21 years after that, from, you know, laying on my mom's floor and watching him on TV fuck with Sam Miniker and Dick the Bruiser, to being introduced by him when now I'm the top manager in the company that he's working for. He's retired and become an announcer, obviously, but, you know, that's fucking strange, odd, surrealistic even.
And boy, were you sweating.
Oh my God, it was hotter than the fucking 8th level of hell in that building. Oh, good Lord. Because the place was packed. I think they used it for... somebody said when they tweeted here, when we talked about it, as I said earlier this year, that it's still there and it's still a dump, and I think they use it for not rodeos, but just stock shows, cattle. There was cattle barns. There were cows outside, and there was no... those lights were in there bouncing off that tin roof. It was like being in a fucking oven. Raw was not glamorous in 1993. Go to the Mid-Hudson Civic Center in Poughkeepsie, which I loved because it was in the same complex as the hotel they put us up, and they had great room service, so you didn't even have to go outside to go to the show. But the goddamn building seated like 1,800 people, and the wrestlers' locker rooms consisted of 2 rooms that basically would double as a standard-size hotel room, with 2 standard-size fucking bathrooms with 1 toilet and a shower stall for 50 fucking WWF wrestlers. You can imagine, besides the line to get into the bathroom at any given point, what the condition was of them later in the night. And the floors were fucking wet and shit, bags everywhere. We had to step over people. The humidity, the walls were fucking sweating. The early years of Raw was not all sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and waterfalls, kids.
Where was the Raw? Because that was a great year for Raw, 93. At least until the end of the summer, Raw was awesome. Where was the Raw where you had the first interview, where you confronted Luger? Was that there? Because he sweated through his suit.
Yes, that's when I announced that I was the American spokesperson and approved the contract and stopped the proceedings while I approved same. That was the second hour that we taped that night. Yeah, everybody, it was like you just turned a shower hose on everybody. It was so fucking hot. He sweated through everything he had. Luger was a free perspirer. Anyway, Michael Hayes may have melted if he'd worked for the company at that point in time. If he'd have gone in that building, he may have looked like Vincent Price in the House of Wax.
Our next question is about a story you haven't told in quite a while, maybe a new listener here. This was sent to cornydrivethrue@gmail.com from Brian Hamilton. Can Jim recount his experience in ECW? How was he recruited to do the angle? Is it true he held Heyman hostage that night before entering the building, allegedly for an apology?
Oh my God.
What was the energy like in the building? Did he enjoy the experience? And is there anything related to ECW he's never discussed? What is his relationship with Paulie like? And does he respect him as a booker?
Well, I've talked about it. Yes, I respect Paul as a booker. He was a genius at getting the most out of the least. He was not organized. I don't know if I praise his preparatory skills, but he did a lot of good shit. As far as what our relationship is right now, I haven't seen him since 2007, I don't think, so I don't know that it's good or bad. And the story with ECW, I held him hostage for an apology. Shouldn't we just go find the program where I told this like 5 years ago and plug it in? I'll tell it briefly again. I'm sitting at home, as I usually am when these problems start. I'm sitting at home in Connecticut. I was working in Stamford then, so I live up from Stamford in the house I was renting. Phone rings, it's Chris Candido. He says, JC, he said, I gotta ask you a favor. At the time, he was helping Paul book. He was also helping Paul with the travel, and he and Tammy, it was part of their problems, were also putting a lot of the guys' travel expenses on their credit cards. Paul never reimbursed them. But if you were having a problem with the money or lack thereof, Paul would give you an office position or some senior help position so that, you wouldn't bail and feel responsible. Anyway, he says, we're kind of stuck and we need a surprise for this coming week's ECW Arena show. I said, what do you mean you need a surprise? He said, well, every month at the ECW Arena we have a surprise. We don't have one. I said, if you have one every month, then it's not a surprise. the definition of a surprise is a shocking, unexpected event. If people are expecting a shocking event at the show every time, it's neither shocking nor surprising. But anyway, he said, well, because that's when they had Lawler in. And Lawler was doing a deal which was, you know, art imitating life, extremely crappy wrestling. He did hate that shit. He thought it was a bunch of bullshit. But Heyman knew that Lawler was a master fucking psychologist, a master worker. He could have a match with anybody, and also the people would legitimately believe that he hated them and looked down their nose at him, or his nose at them, which he did. So he had a ton of heat. So they wanted me to come out as a surprise and fucking help him beat up Dreamer and Sandman and all those guys. And basically, Chris, I'm not really, you know, be cool working with Lawler, but I'm not really interested. But he said, well, can you help me? Because, you know, it would mean a lot to me if I could land something like this, and I'm trying to help Paul out. Would you do it for me for a favor? And he said, well, we can give you a good payoff. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, to make everybody feel good about this, I will do it, but not for a payoff, for a condition. One condition. This was 3 or maybe almost 4 years after the Heyman had screwed Dennis Coralluzzo on the NWA title tournament where Shane Douglas threw the belt down and Dennis was buried, didn't know what was going to go on, and then there'd been heat. Dennis, of course, tried to do his outlaw show stuff and you know, pull their posters down and everything, but also there was a moratorium on talent sharing, and a bunch of the local ECW guys couldn't fucking work for Dennis, even though they were off, and vice versa. So I said, how about this, Chris? I said, if Paul Heyman will apologize to Dennis Coralluzzo for what he did to him at the NWA show, and that they will bury the hatchet, and they can trade talent, Dennis on his local shows can use some of those guys, vice versa, whatever the fuck, they work together, then I'll do it for nothing. Well, let me see what I can do.
Another little detail you should probably throw in here for those that don't know is that Chris Candido years before was Dennis Coralluzzo's guy.
Oh, yeah.
He was the guy Dennis pushed more than anyone, and then, of course, he ends up being under Paul Heyman, and that did fracture the relationship with him and Dennis.
Yeah. And you know, Dennis thought about Chris like a second son there for a while, put him on all his shows. That's where I had first met Chris, and that's the whole reason why he ended up Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But anyway, so he says, I'll call you back, or I'll have Paul call you. I said, have Paul call me. So whether he called me back and Paulie was there or Paul called me, one or another, I got on the phone with Paul. I said, Paul, now, I said, I know you're full of shit now, and you know I know you're full of shit, but don't lie to me on this, and I'll do what you want me to do. And he's like, oh, come on. I said, no, I'm just being upfront. Here's what, I don't want any money. I just want shake hands, bury the hatchet with Dennis, and apologize to him for what you did. I'll do this fucking show for you. And it's open to do something else if everybody's happy. So that was the arrangement. But then he says, well, I'll send a ride for you. I said, it's fucking Philly. I'm right up above Stamford. I said, I can be there in 3 hours because it's a weekend. I'll drive down like I do everywhere else. No, I'll send a car for you. All right, well, just send him. I'll meet him at the office in Stamford. Okay. And I think then he told me on the phone also, and I'll have him take you get something to eat beforehand. I said, well, that's nice. But the deal was that instead of me, and this is answering the question of that the guy was asking about the atmosphere at the arena and all this stuff. Paulie was plain to say that we want this to be a surprise, so we're going to have you hide in the car until the last possible minute and then bring you in and run you to the ring, right? So I knew that was going to happen. So on the aforementioned day, I get to the office, Titan Tower in Stamford, park my car in the garage, and there comes a limousine. Not even just a Corsa, but a limousine with the window where I can close it up and down on fucking driver if I want to and everything. And I get in there, and he drives me down to Philadelphia, where I'm scheduled. I've told Dennis I was going to meet him. We're going to go over together, and we pick Dennis up, meet him, and the driver takes us to Morton's Steakhouse in Philadelphia, where we walk in, and the driver, everything is on Mr. Heyman, right? Holy. So not only did we eat like we were going to the chair, both of us, but Dennis, when he was on the way out, he was grabbing cigars, stuffing them in his pockets. I mean, the fucking bill was like $400. I'm like, I don't feel bad for fucking Eamon because I'm not charging him, right? And I didn't ask for a fucking limousine. The Mortons I would have fucking taken, right? I took. So anyway, the limousine then takes me and Dennis over to the ECW arena. And by this time it's dark, because the show is already going on, plus we're in the back of a fucking limousine with tinted windows. The first time that I went to the ECW arena for Ring of Honor television, it's the first time I actually saw not only what it looked like, but the fucking neighborhood. And I was dumbfounded. If I'd have known that we were going into that neighborhood in a fucking limousine, I wouldn't have done it. But anyway, we get to the back of somewhere I can't really see otherwise, and it's not real visually impressive where I'm at. In the limousine, the driver goes in, Paul comes out. The boys still don't know, the boys on the card still don't know that I'm going to be there. And he gets in the limousine, and there he and Dennis is, and I see it, they shake hands, and Paul's exact words were, bygones, water under the bridge, all is forgiven, let's work together. They shook hands. Okay, thank you for Morton's, Paul. Here's what we want you to do. And he said the lights are going to be off, and when they come back on, they're going to have smuggled me to the ring, and I'm going to help Lawler, and we're going to whale the shit out of these ECW babyfaces. And he said, we're going to bring you in a few minutes. And then he looked at Dennis, he said, now here's the thing, the show is already going on. I didn't want to blow the surprise of Cornette being here by announcing to the guys what's going to happen. If you go in, Dennis, you've got a lot of heat, there'll be trouble before I can make this announcement that all is forgiven. So don't let them see you right now. And Jim, we're going to smuggle you in just 5 minutes before your cue. So the only people that are really going to know you're going to be there are Lawler and the guys in the match, and we're going to stay with you right till we shoot you out to the ring, and boy, this is going to be a big pop. Okay, fine. So that's what they did. They brought me in, and I stood there just for 3 or 4 minutes. This whole match was going on until finally somebody waved that the time has come, as Ricky Ricardo and Lucy said when the little Ricky was born. The time has come. And the lights are out, and so when I go out in the arena, the security guys, the Atlas security guys, they're leading me. I don't see what this fucking place looks like. I've been in a one back room where I thought I was in a goddamn old warehouse. And come find out later on, I was right. They looked like shit and holes in the wall big enough to throw a cat through. But I thought, okay, they just don't spend a lot of money on their backstage area. But anyway, they hustle me to the ring in the dark, and then the lights come back on, and the people see me standing there with the goddamn fucking tennis racket, and I believe it was Tommy Dreamer. He's gonna pile drive Lawler, and I whack him, and down he goes, and the place comes unglued. And everybody's seen the video. If you haven't seen it, it's out there on YouTube or wherever. Cornette invades ECW. But now they're down, and Lawler takes the kendo stick, and I didn't know this. In the course of, I've got the racket and I'm beating on people, and Lawler's got the kendo stick, he's been beating on people. He went over and he gave Tommy Dreamer a nut shot with the kendo stick. Well, Lawler is 99% of the time is unerring in his accuracy and his hand-eye coordination, right? Well, this was number 100. He hit fucking Dreamer right square at his balls, and they swelled up like baby watermelons. And Dreamer is in the corner now, slumped in the corner, holding his fucking crotch, and I go over and start giving him some headshots with the racket, and he's not selling register or nothing. He's just in a fetal position. And I was like, okay, how'd you see me? I just walk away from him. I'm like, well, what the fuck, right? He's fucked. He had to go to the hospital. But the people threw garbage, everything they could get their hands on. It was thrilling heat because they knew that I was probably the only other guy in wrestling that was the same as Lawler, that legitimately this was not a work, and I was not there because I was just working, but I disliked all of these people. So once we finish, I can't remember what the out was, we're knee-deep in garbage, and the security grabs us and just says, run, and off we go. And as soon as we got back to the back, I didn't have anything in the locker room. The security guys grabbed me and ran me straight to the back door. Paul is standing there, and as I go by, he fucking throws an envelope in my hand and says, thanks, and I'm out the door and back in the fucking limo, and they said, we're gonna get you out of here now, because like the people were gonna be coming out and rioting or whatever, and we drove off. And I opened the envelope, and there's $750 in cash in the envelope. So we go back and drop Dennis off, and then I'm driven back to Stamford. There was no internet to speak of back in those days. I certainly wasn't on one, but then we heard over the next few days, and you know, whatever the newsletters came out, that this was a big deal, and holy shit. And Candido called me, I think, the next day to say thank you or whatever. But you remember your Dennis Coralluzzo history better than I do. Was it the very next day, or was it the day after that basically Paulie accused Dennis of trying to steal some of his talent or do something, and said they would never have anything to do with each other, and he never went through on his fucking promise?
I don't remember how long it was, but it was pretty instant.
It was pretty quick. And then basically the one thing that I asked for, I got a $400 dinner at Morton Steakhouse that I didn't ask for. I got a limousine ride from Stamford to Philly and back that I didn't ask for. I got $750 in cash that I didn't ask for. But the one thing that I did ask for, I got in front of me at the time, and then within days, Paulie found some reason to not do it and never actually announced that it had happened to his locker room. So then Candido calls me and says, well, hey, you want to make Asbury Park next month? I'm like, no, I don't. I don't want to make anything else ever again. I said I would if everybody was happy. Well, you weren't happy? I said I was happy until I found out I didn't get the one thing I asked for. No, if Paulie swerved me again to get me, he swerved me again, but he got me to do it, and then he gave me enough things that I didn't ask for to where he could feel like, or at least relay the story, that, well, what else does he want? When the only thing I wanted was what I asked for to begin with. It's like when he told Dixie, well, only if you give me ownership, then I'll come in and straighten everything out. He knew that's the one thing she wouldn't do, and he knew he couldn't straighten it out, because nobody could. And he didn't want to be involved, but he also didn't want to be the heel and turn it down. Then all the wrestling fans would go, why wouldn't Paul save TNA? So he made it TNA's fault. He's a genius.
Do you think Paul ever had any intentions on sharing talent with Dennis, or do you think maybe he saw the Morton's bill and said, what the fuck are these guys doing? I mean, what do you think? What do you think?
No, he did what he had to do to get me to come down and do the thing, and then he gave me enough other stuff to make himself not feel bad, and or to be able to tell other people that it wasn't reasonable what I asked for.
But the fact that he wanted you again, the fact that they actually had an expectation of you, I mean, it's an angle building up to another thing, whatever that would be. And they tried to get you for Asbury Park. If it's a one-off, I get that. I did whatever I could to get him here, and now that's that. But they had an intention to go forward with Jim Cornette and ECW.
One would think, because nobody ever laid a hand on me. I beat up all their top baby faces and fucking left. But I don't know. I do not know. And once again, it's not even... It was some fucking bogus bullshit that Paul... A reason that he determined he wasn't going to work with Dennis. But he never even publicly announced that he was going to, after he privately announced it to me and Dennis, before he turned around and just reiterated to the public at large, well, we're not going to be working with Dennis Coralluzzo. And we ought to call Mark or somebody and try to track down what specific childish, fucking blow-up they had at that point or whatever, to determine whatever kind of reason that he gave, because I can't remember what it was. But it didn't take 48 hours. So I don't. So to answer the question, did he just think I would come back, or did he just think, well, if he doesn't, it doesn't matter because we got our surprise? I don't know. It's but it wasn't going to happen that way.
And the thing is, a lot of those guys started out working for Dennis because they were all local guys. Other than the fly-ins, they worked for Dennis. A lot of them
Sandman, Dreamer,
Pitbulls, and a lot of them would end up working for Dennis again. After they left ECW, there were a lot of shows with Public Enemy and the Pitbulls, and Big Dick Dudley and 911 and various people from ECW on those shows. And Dennis used a lot of guys that ECW later used. Dennis was the first one to use Sabu. He used Chris Benoit.
Dennis was the first one to bring Eddie Gilbert to Philadelphia. Remember that? And he ended up, and then that's who Paul Iggy'd out of the book so he could take over ECW.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot there. And then I believe after the NWA screw job in '94, Terry Funk walked away from ECW for several months because he was so upset about the way it went down, not just because of the NWA being treated like that, and he has a long history with the NWA, but Terry Funk was another guy that Dennis was bringing up to shows for years.
Joel Goodhart had brought Terry in a couple of times before he folded up, but Terry had been working Dennis's shows at least half a dozen times a year.
So, I mean, there's a lot there. We should probably talk to Mark one day, just so we can at least get his version of that famous Dave Baumkrat story where you guys were in the meeting room and he brought in the sodas. One of the greatest ribs ever, because no one got hurt.
Oh, but yes, so that was my glorious debut and final appearance in ECW in the same night. I came in, beat up all of their top baby faces, left without anybody putting a hand on me, and got everything except what I'd asked for to do it to begin with. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another one of those free and easy editions of the Jim Cornette Experience. Today, we're going to talk about pro wrestling throughout history, why some people wrestle is a mystery, people refusing the Hall of Fame, and a wrestling show that has no shame. And now, to join me in all of that, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you. He's a poet and don't know it, but his feet show it because they're long, fellas. The great Brian Last, everybody.
Aloha, Jim, and what a pleasure it is to be here once again. Back on Fridays. It's nice.
Well, now you've just fucking give people a bad impression here right as soon as you open your mouth, because they're not going to hear this till Saturday. We're recording it on Friday, so it's nicer for us, but they're going to hear it on Saturday, just like they have been, maybe a little bit earlier. Depends on what Sharknado gets into.
That's right. Gets into. That's right. What do you mean what it gets into?
Well, whatever is involved. Every once in a while, we get a call from his parole officer. He hadn't made contact, and I just want to make sure that everything's still all right with his schedule. But did you enjoy Canada Day?
Did I enjoy Canada Day?
Did you enjoy Canada Day? I feel you're close enough up there.
I do not celebrate Canada Day, and I believe that's July 1st. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you, the specifics of what exactly Canada... Is it just a celebration of the country?
Well, I don't know. I'm not from Canada. I thought you'd know because
you've been banned from there. I thought you would know things about
it. Well, that's why they didn't give me the whole goddamn list of all the festivities and things, because I'm not allowed to go to them unless I get that paperwork filled out that they informed me that I could get filled out, and that'll happen on the 12th of Never. But I thought, I know what they do in Tennessee because we're right next door. So you're up there in the Northeast. You're right there amongst them practically. I remember it wasn't but a hop, skip, and a jump from Stamford, Connecticut to Montreal, Canada. Just a bit up the road.
What a fantastic city.
Yeah, well, fromage.
Probably Canada's best city.
What?
Montreal.
Now, just hold it. Just pump your...
Oh, you can have a good time in Montreal, I'll tell you.
Vancouver. Number one, the people are speaking English like folks are supposed to, instead of all those French Canadians. Number two, you can read the road signs without getting a headache. Number three, it's out there on the coast. It's all beautiful. Montreal is like the New York of Canada. Toronto is like Chicago of Canada.
And New York's the best.
No.
Yes.
New York is the place you want to avoid at all costs.
Well, now, yes. Now you have a point. But
now you change your story.
I don't want to go into Manhattan anymore. I'm sick of Manhattan's dead right now. There's nothing I want to do there. There's no business meetings I have to do there anymore. I can do everything remotely, which is beautiful. I kind of don't want to go into Manhattan for a very long time. I've lost it from Manhattan. It's just such a pain in the ass to go into New York anymore.
People have been asking me to work remotely for years now. I think one phrase exactly was as far away as possible as you can get. But I guess I'm always a trendsetter.
Which apparently was Louisville, Kentucky. That's as far away as you could get.
If anybody wants to know where I'll be from now on. And I know everybody's waiting for the wildlife update, because we start the program, you know, on a weekly basis with the wildlife update, and unfortunately I have, you know, no big news. It was wonderful day before yesterday, early in the morning. It was a bit cool. It's been hot during the day, but it was a bit cool very early, like 6:30 or so, and I saw all 4 baby deer. I shouldn't say babies now. All 4 of the adolescent deer. They're not big enough to hop over the fence yet. They still got the cute spots and everything, but they're getting bigger. They're growing up. But all 4 of them were hanging out while the 2 mamas were drinking out of the creek and socializing. I guess they probably have a book club set up or something at this point. We didn't get the rain we were looking for. Yesterday, I'll have you know, it hasn't rained here in a while. Good rains, you know, for the trees and the grass, and, you know, get rid of the drought conditions, soak the ground and everything, make everything look nice and green. And so finally they said, well, we're going to get the heavy rain. It's coming 1 to 3 inches, depending on the area of town, right? And so yesterday, the big rain day came, and I'm sitting here waiting, and I'm watching the news, and they even had live camera footage of the downpour, the deluge in downtown Louisville. Again, this will be the 2nd time this week this has happened. And I had a sprinkle going on. And then I watched the 6 o'clock news last night at the airport. 15 miles as the crow flies, 3 inches of rain, 10 miles south of the airport, 4 inches of rain, 15 miles east of me, 2 inches of rain, 15 miles north of me, 2.5 inches of rain. You know how much rain we got right here on top of my house? 9/10 of an inch. Didn't even wash off the creek real good. So I'm still waiting for my rain. And I had to chase a mouse out of the house. A mouse had taken up residence in our sunroom. I don't know, he wasn't invited. He did, as we mentioned in the past, mice have horrible toilet habits. And he was hiding behind and underneath furniture for some time, apparently. Must have wandered in when the back door was open, the only thing I can figure. Because we are out here in the jungle, Brian. We've established that. It's the law of the jungle. But that stops at my door. So fortunately, I did a complete clean of that room yesterday with the pine sol and everything, and the mouse has vacated the premises, even though he left his evidence behind. But we have a mouse-free home again. And he's got a few little things sitting out waiting for him just in case he decides to come back. I will not have the law of the jungle being brought into my own home, Brian, here at the castle.
Don't have the law of the jungle in your own castle. And, of course, the wildlife segment brought to you by the law office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084.
Stephen P. New would have been a great co-host for Marlon Perkins on Wild Kingdom. Marlon Perkins could be, instead of that Jim Fowler, who it could be like Marlon Perkins could say, I'll wait in the truck while Stephen P. New goes out and pries the lion's jaws apart with his bare hands. Brought to you by Mutual of Omaha.
You think you have a jungle? Go to West Virginia.
Well, that's true. He does have some experience in dealing with some of those wild jungle creatures over there. Especially, for heaven's sake, the ones in Beckley are the wildest. We've got lawsuit papers to prove that. Anyway, and by the way, just real quick before we start talking about the wrestling news, and we want to talk about somebody particular, but Bill Cosby is out of prison. They let Bill Cosby out of jail. Did you hear the reasoning behind why he got let out of jail?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't followed it too closely, it was because the original prosecutor made an agreement with him that he wouldn't prosecute him, and I guess the state Supreme Court said you have to honor that despite him being Bill fucking Cosby. Yeah, that's all I heard. Was that what happened?
Exactly. Yes, that's what every news outlet is reporting, is that they have overturned the conviction because the original prosecutor promised he wouldn't prosecute him. Promised he wouldn't charge him. Well, then you well, number one, who would make that promise, and number two, who would hold anybody to that promise? Oh, we won't charge you for anything. Oh, you raped 60 people? Well, gosh, sorry. What the fuck? Because the prosecutor promised him they wouldn't charge him, that no matter what crimes that it's found out after the fact that he has perpetrated or committed or conspired to commit or whatever terminology, now that, okay, it's all right. Can he go on a Manson family killing spree now?
It's going to be really interesting to hear what he says during the next stand-up special.
Well, he can barely stand up now. Anyway, he's going to have to be a sit-down comedian from here on out if he chooses to go back to work. I couldn't believe it. He walks in, it's like, what the fuck? They found him guilty. He was guilty of doing these things. Put the prosecutor that promised that they wouldn't charge the guilty man in jail for promising that you wouldn't charge a criminal with his crimes. That ought to be a crime. Is that not a crime? Is it not a crime to promise that you won't charge a criminal with his crimes?
In certain respects, it certainly should be, and I think this is one of them.
Well, I think we ought to go around closing up those loopholes. NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084. That's a free one, Stephen. Anyway.
I feel awful for all of his victims, but specifically the one, I forget her name right now, but you know the one whose story was the one that caused this whole thing.
I think it was Andrea Conti.
Yeah, that's it. I feel awful for her right now. To see this fucking creep walk out of fucking prison, celebrating, arms in the air with these fucking stooges running around like they won the lottery.
And now he's going to spend a few days in one of their homes, one of the Cosby homes, with his wife, who never visited him while he was in prison. They haven't seen each other in 3 years.
Ah, remember me?
Oh, God. Would you like a pudding pop? Suck on this pudding pop, honey.
Unbelievable.
It's been 3 years.
How much money do you think he lost in royalties from the Cosby Show after all this? I mean, do you think there's any place right now that... I mean, if there is, I don't know. Is there any place that actually airs any Bill Cosby properties anymore?
I didn't go out of my way to find them when they were on the air, and I haven't looked for them, but you don't see any commercials or any advertisements or any things of that nature. How is Jell-O Pudding doing these days? Are they still in business?
They've gotten far away from him like Subway from Jared Fogle. There's no relationship right now.
Oh, and... Subway and Jared. Did you see? Well, no, because you're so culturally deprived. But they did the South Park episode with the guy, Jared. They said Jared, oh, God, how did they set it up? But anyway, he needed aides. He needed, like, assistants. Aides to help everybody understand.
Oh, no.
So he wanted to give all the children aides. But here's the thing. Do you remember? You're not old enough to remember. I am. Aunt Lola had a few extra pounds on her. She was a cherubic-faced and portly woman. And at one point in the early 70s, she was taking these diet candies that they used to, and they used to sell a bunch of them. You see the advertisements everywhere. They were little, like, chocolate mint things, and they were called AIDS. AIDS. They aided you in losing weight. They were weight loss aids. And lose weight with AIDS. And I'm pretty sure they've been out of business since the 80s now. But that was a strange example of something. I don't know where we were going with that.
I don't know why we're talking about this, but on that topic, did you know that Guns N' Roses originally wanted to call themselves as a band AIDS? Because they thought it would be great for publicity.
And that's serious.
That's serious, yeah.
Well, given Axl Rose's other life and career choices, I can't actually say that I'm surprised at that.
If you met Axl Rose, I don't know where this would happen or how this would happen. If you met Axl Rose and
he's a notoriously bad driver of Ford Mustangs. He's going to come over the hill and land on my fence. That's how I meet Axl Rose.
No, that's Billy Joel. But if you met Axl Rose, how long do you think it would take before you brought up Dick the Bruiser, right? He's an Indiana guy. He had to grow up watching that.
Well, and now that you mention it, that might actually be the only conversation starter I can think of that I could bring up with Axl Rose if me and him were to sit down to have a chat. What else would we talk about? Well, I guess the weather in Indiana.
Possibly. So
now you've introduced me to Axl Rose. What's next? Before we get started with the rest of the program, there's another situation where somebody's passed away, and it just happened. Well, I just heard yesterday, it may have been the night before previous or whatever, but Del Wilkes, the Patriot, passed away apparently of a major heart attack, and he was he 58 or 59 now? I forgot. 59, my age. But, you would think to look at Del, I mean, I haven't seen him in quite some time, but he was always a, tall, healthy, square-jawed guy, but I know he had the problems with pain pills and prescription pills for a long time, but, I hate to hear that. I know that some people may think, well, what the fuck, he's been wrestling up here until just recently, but the Patriot, Dell's been retired, I guess, out of the ring since what? The late 90s when the WWF run. He tore his triceps again, I think. That was pretty much it. Maybe he made an appearance or two in a few years after that.
Maybe. I'm trying to remember if he went back to Japan, because that's where he would make an appearance, if anywhere.
I don't think because he had already had triceps problems. We'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, people are saying, well, I've seen the Patriot. No, Tom Brandi has been using the gimmick of recent years. I don't know if he's done that in a while. Tom Brandi's got to be getting up there. But Del was the one to originate it, and as I said, he hasn't wrestled in some time. He got into car sales, and he's from South Carolina. But anyway, I first saw him. He was part of Pedicino's Global Wrestling Federation, as you well remember, and I remember that was at the point where Joe was starting to find out he didn't have access to as much money as he thought he did because the Nigerian backer wasn't coming through. And at one point, Del, as the Patriot, was one of the major stars, and actually one of the only guys on the roster that really looked like he could be a major star in wrestling. And he started out as what, the trooper in the AWA?
Yeah.
Where he had a state trooper gimmick, and that was the dying days of the AWA, and he was very green, but you could tell, I mean, just with that look, and he looked like a movie star facially. The old-fashioned movie star with a square jaw and curly hair, but handsome, as they used to say about men who still looked like men. But he was really green. But then with the Patriot gimmick, it was flashy, and I've always, I mean, Mil Mosca has proved guys with good physiques and a colorful set of tights and a colorful mask are photogenic. They get over if they can do anything, if they can work and fit whatever the gimmick is that it calls for. And he was different because there were no more masked baby faces. And it was the 90s of perfect, the red, white, and blue, the Patriot. So even though Global didn't go anywhere, that gave him a gimmick that he could use for a while. And then, he had several good runs in Japan. They just loved, big Americans there. But really what everybody will probably remember is that brief run in the WWF as the Patriot. And how it, that was what perpetrated my fight with Kevin Dunn, which is on YouTube, and we won't go into the whole detail there of the production meeting in Halifax, but he was so classic wrestling that neither Vince knew or cared about what to do with him. And I remember one night early on, because Russo just basically shit all over the gimmick in private. He wouldn't, not to Del's face, but when me and him still spoke, me and Shitstain, He was riding back with, this may have been the night that I told him the story about the fucking heels carrying guns in the car, and he morphed that into I pulled a gun on some old lady in traffic. But we were riding back from a Raw to the hotel, and I'm going to say it was in Oklahoma. Raw had been in Oklahoma City. Maybe we were driving back to Dallas to fly out. But we were in a car together. And that was one of the nights that the Patriot had first got there. He comes out with the music that they later used for Kurt Angle. Waving the American flag. He's got that cool fucking sequined red, white, and blue Patriot mask on. His body looks like $1 million. He's 6'6". And he came out and tore the house down. The people loved him. They gave him an ovation. He got over. Whatever he did in the match that night, I can't remember. They loved him, right? And we're talking about it, and Russo was gobsmacked. He said, I can't believe. I said, what do you, because he was looking at it like, well, if he had come out in New York at Madison Square Garden, they'd have booed him out of the building with all that patriotic crap. I said, you fucking moron. That's why you shouldn't pay attention to what goes on in New York. Because the rest of the country ain't like that. And we were just in Oklahoma City, and he's waving the American flag, and he's the Patriot. You think they're gonna fucking boo him? Of course they love. He looks like $1 million, and he can work, and he can talk. I said, so what the fuck are you surprised about? This is a new baby face. We're short of baby faces. We need to push this guy. He can get over. He looks like a star. Can you imagine the merchandising on the masks, right? And then before the fight at the in the production meeting in Halifax with Kevin Dunn, I said, look, if you want me to work with Dell, I'll work with him. I'll produce his promos or whatever, right? I'll do whatever, because we need this guy. And as you remember, the babyface situation on the roster in, what was 1997 was, I mean, there was some stars that had been there, but there was nobody new, and it wasn't deep.
Also important to note, this is the period of time where I don't even know if you could say yet he was a full-fledged heel, but Bret was babyface in Canada, heel in America.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the rosters, who's a babyface and who wasn't, that created an interesting dynamic. And of course, it was Bret and the Patriot that was working together.
Right. And that's the gist of the argument at the production meeting was they wanted to kick the shit out of the Patriot in some respect with the Hart Foundation and leave him laying. And in Canada, they were going to cheer the shit out of that because of what they were doing. And I said, no. I said, he can do it to Shawn. He can do it to this. He can do it to Undertaker. He can do it to whoever, but he can't do it to this guy because he's not over yet. He just got here. And we don't need the people on television watching around the world to see the crowd wildly cheering this guy, getting the shit kicked out of him. It's too soon. But anyway, even before that, they wanted to introduce him. He was just there, so they wanted to, okay, let's do some promos. Well, instead of, the guy was well-spoken, and he had that deep voice, and he could talk, and he understood wrestling. It was from, as I said, from South Carolina. He grew up watching the Carolinas wrestling. He was trained by Fabulous Moolah, for Christ's sake, initially. So they give him a pre-tape interview, because you know who's formatting the show, Shitstain. A pre-tape interview in one of the boxes that was supposed to play during his entrance. All right, well then let's say what you got to say. And he cuts a fucking promo. It was supposed to be 30 seconds. It was 1:05. But it was good. It was a new babyface that could speak and could fucking get over. I said, that's perfect. Let them fucking use it. They'll fit it in. Then we hear on the... No, it's too long. I said, well, it's good, but it's too long. It's supposed to be 30 seconds. I said, but it's good. I said, he didn't think it was good? Kevin Dunn, meaning. I'm talking to the production assistant. He didn't watch it. I said, tell him to watch it, and then if he still thinks it's too long, then we'll redo it. Get the word back. He's not going to watch it. It's too long. I said, then tell him that he's going to have to get somebody else to fucking shoot it because it's good and I'm not redoing it. If he ain't going to watch it, I ain't doing it again. This is the kind of shit you had to do with this fucking Kevin Dunn, this Weasley Bucky Beaver motherfucker sitting in his fucking truck. But anyway, nevertheless, they had fucking, I think Bruce came out and redid it 30 seconds. It wasn't half as fucking good, and they put that on the air. They were sabotaging this fucking guy because Shitstain didn't understand it and didn't understand him and was too interested in people that he, could fucking make silly. And Vince McMahon thought it was too wrestling because that's a classic babyface. And Kevin Dunn had his nose up Vince McMahon's ass and didn't care because as long as you just don't fuck with his fucking television, he'll be fine. So he had some great matches there, I thought, initially. And then, I can't even remember who it was with, but he tore the triceps again. He'd had problems and triceps injuries, especially for big guys like that, are fucking tough, and he'd done it more than once, I think in each arm. Which, in turn, apparently led to or exacerbated his prescription pill problem. And I didn't even know about that until, here's the thing, you can know, like everybody knew that Michaels was fucked up on a regular basis. In some cases, it's obvious who's got a problem with pills or whatever. But Del Wilkes, you would have thought you were dealing with a South Carolina State Trooper. He always showed up dressed, on time, professional, never incoherent, never... not in any condition or even slightly in a condition not to perform. I wish we'd have had 15 guys with the attitude that he had and that was as easy to work with as he was back then, and we wouldn't have had any fucking headaches. But he's another guy that they didn't get it. They didn't want to get it. They couldn't see it, and he got a crummy run there as a result of that. And obviously, as I mentioned, after getting hurt, whatever, and nobody was in any hurry to bring him back, and I'm sure he wasn't probably in a hurry to go back if he could have. But I always thought that this guy, I don't know why, didn't it? At one point, did WCW pick him up, but it was like in 94, it was a couple of years before the WWF, and he was there for a little while, but that was at a point in time where they were almost in a federal witness protection program, and nobody was paying attention.
He was actually pretty good in WCW. He was good in Global. And you said he was one of their big guys. They built everything around him. He was the top babyface in the company. And eventually when Eddie booked, he booked his brother Doug as the Dark Patriot.
Oh, God. And then there was Doug in a complete full bodysuit and no physique whatsoever, and is all black with the Dark Patriot.
But you were right.
But stand Doug Gilbert next to Del Wilkes. Anyway.
But you were right. He looked like a star. He had presence. He had a really cool theme song at the time. It was kind of like a takeoff of Van Halen Jump. And then he was kind of gone. And it was weird because so many of the guys from Global would pop up in different places, and you didn't see him pop up anywhere. I didn't know what he was doing in Japan or anything. And then when he popped up in WCW, they put him in a tag team with Marcus Bagwell, who, despite being Marcus Bagwell and all that carries, I actually like two tag teams he was in. Him and Scorpio and him and the Patriot. I think they were Stars and Stripes. But they were both good tag teams, and him and the Patriot were good, and then, once again, the Patriot just kind of vanished from there, but that was 94, I think.
And what name was he using in Japan? Was he going to Japan? I can't
the
see
Patriot.
Was he doing the Patriot in Japan?
Because then they put Jackie Fulton with him as the Eagle.
That's right. Because Jackie had that Eagle outfit. I remember Bobby telling me about it. Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers had gone to Japan many times as the Fantastics, but when Bobby started teaming with Jackie as the Fantastics here in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and the other places on Independence, when Tommy was on the other side of the country and couldn't just, bop in anytime, Bobby and Jackie were the team, but then he got Jackie that outfit so that they could try to... Bobby and Tommy would still go to Japan, but he was trying to get Jackie over there as the Eagle and finally did. The Eagle and the Patriot. What more Japanese idolatry than that? I'm sure they worship here's the fucking, in Japan, the American flag that bombed us 50 years ago, but we're gonna cheer him now. Anyway.
But he was, and you were right about his promos. He had a great voice, and he could get fired up, and he didn't look ridiculous wearing the mask. It seemed reasonable that he was a masked wrestler. One of the last great American-style masked wrestlers, really, when you think about it, to get on TV.
Think about it. Jerry Stubbs looked like Ned without that Mr. Olympia mask, because he was a great upper body, big chest, big arms, hell of a worker, amazingly agile for 240 or 50 pounds or whatever he was. They called him P-head, the boys in the locker room. He had a small, tiny head, Jerry Stubbs did. And and he was balding. But when he put that Mr. Olympia mask on, holy shit. But with Del, like you said, the promos, he had a southern accent, but not in a hokey Ernest T. Bass way, but in a kind of a cool action hero from the South in a movie way, the cool southern accent, but with the deep voice, and he could get fired up and he could cut a promo and make you listen. I really, I wish he hadn't been so injury prone, and I'm sorry to hear in later years about the problems that he came out and admitted and talked about with his drug addiction. I want to say I saw him last probably at a Charlotte reunion, but one of the fan fests 4 or 5 years ago, and I hugged him and, talked a little bit, but, and he looked great back then. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my God, what's happened to so-and-so, like you sometimes react when you see somebody. So I assume this came out of nowhere.
Great opponent for Brett, too.
Yeah.
Great fit.
And see, Brett was trying to, within the parameters of what they were giving him, in terms of the booking to work with, to help Del get over also as that gimmick, because he knew and saw that we needed other top guys. But just, the Patriot was the one caught in the mix in between DX and the Hart Foundation, and who's a heel in the United States and who's a heel in Canada, and et cetera, et cetera. And
do you think anything would have been different if you got the Patriot a year and a half earlier? There in a whole period of time where you had, the Goon and all these guys coming in. When you needed guys, and you really needed bodies then. If you had gotten the Patriot then, you think they would have done a better job?
Yes, because it would have been before that weird, it worked for the Hart Foundation and DX and Brett being a dual babyface and heel and etc. That worked in that instance, but it wasn't the best thing for the Patriot to be in the middle of it. If he'd have come in a year and a half earlier, as short as they were on talent then, it was before Shitstain had anything to do with anything. You would have been relying on Bruce Pritchard and I wasn't there till early 96, but Pat was still there till late 95. Pat Patterson, that would have been a gimmick that was right up his alley to fucking get over. Classic old-time wrestling gimmick. So he would have seen that Del could talk and work. I think, if he'd come in a year and a half earlier, provided he stayed injury-free again. I mean, that's always a wild card. But he would have had a lot longer to get established before Shitstain led Vince McMahon's worst anti-wrestling tendencies down and magnified them all. So by then, if he was a top guy by then, they wouldn't have fucked with him. But anyway, but I was sad to hear about that. Like I said, I don't know any interaction he's had with anybody else, but always a nice guy to me, and I really thought he was a good talent that should have gone a lot farther. Anyway, speaking of good talents that shouldn't go any farther, I'm not leaving Louisville, Kentucky, Brian, but it appears that there's rumors that I am. Did you hear about this?
I did hear about this. I spoke with Stephen P. New about this, actually. This popped up, and it appears that, in no surprise, because the big stars are doing it, why not the nobodies? Someone's trying to use the name of Jim Cornette to get some attention.
Well, and I appreciate the little fellas thinking of me. I really do. But apparently, and this is funny, and I'm not going to cuss anybody because it's ridiculous. But it just goes to show you that, God, these are people that are actually running shows that are advertised and purported to be professional wrestling these days. So I get up, 2 days ago, and turn on the Twitter machine, and there people have tweeted me, look at this. My fans, folks who listen to the program or who follow me on Twitter or whatever, wouldn't be fooled by this because they know what the scoop is. But there is a serious repercussion of some of this is that, if just average John and his little son Johnny and his little wife Emily want to go see a fucking wrestling match and they see names of stars bandied about on local advertising, they might be fooled. For those people, this is serious, but for anybody who knows better, this was fucking funny as hell. Some outlaw mud show promoter, allegedly, in Florida man, puts out on Facebook or wherever they do their advertising these days for these things, the cockfights, the dog fights, the bestiality porn video sales, and the outlaw mud show wrestling matches. There's a strong rumor that Jim Cornette may show up at such and such wrestling show in a fucking room at a hotel somewhere or something to confront such and such mud show wrestling's so-and-so, who coincidentally is, I think, the guy writing the rumor on Facebook. And what in the world is going to be said and done if he does show up? And of course, it's me. There's a rumor Jim Cornette's going to show up and blah, 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 blah. And it ain't me, because everybody knows I ain't going to Florida. And if I was going to Florida, I would be charging somebody else a lot more money than this guy. But Brian, it's ridiculous. Talk about a bait and switch. Now, here's the thing. As soon as I get up, and by the yard mowers are here also. I think they left your house and went to my place. As soon as I see this, I send a tweet saying there's a strong rumor that this guy has no money and is trying to swindle people into buying a ticket. What I didn't know was that our attorney, yours and mine, our attorney, the Cult of Cornette's attorney, the consigliere, Stephen P. New, who apparently never sleeps, had already seen that slanderous, false advertising. And overnight, while I was blissfully asleep, unaware that my name was being bandied about by some cretinous, underhanded humanoid trying to profit off false information, he'd already sent the cease and desist letter. And the guy has already started going humming, and they took all that down. And then Stephen, of course, had to, because they were going to try to put this big event on pay-per-view. I swear to God.
Well, I don't think it was real pay-per-view. I think it was
no.
It was the fight.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes, they're calling it a pay-per-view, but it wasn't on pay-per-view television. It was on pay-per-view internet, which apparently you can do that now from the comfort of your own home also. And so Stephen had to let the pay-per-view company know that they were false advertising my trademarked and copyrighted name and etc. But then, guess what happened? They said that first rumor had proven to be not true, but now the new rumor is that old shit state himself, Vince Russo, is going to be the one to show up.
Come on.
And now here's the thing. Obviously, you would think that that's a load of shit. Except Russo, from what the people sent me a screenshot, Russo followed the guy on fucking Twitter after. He's like, oh, a job! Somebody wants me!
Ridiculous.
It's so, god damn it. You can't make that. But anyway, so, Brian, I hate this slow and miserable descent into irrelevance that I've started here in the twilight of my career as I've tried to slow things down and wind things up. I'm so irrelevant that now these promoters, they just try to tease me. Maybe he'll show up and cuss us as a way to sell tickets. Maybe, maybe Cornette will show up and cuss us and we get to cuss at him. Also, there'll be wrestling matches. That's how they're selling these shows now. They name their events Outlaw Mud Show because they think, okay, we're going to advertise this fucking thing, and not a single solitary son of a bitch out there knows who the fuck any of the wrestlers that we're advertising on this show is. But they listen to Cornette. So if we just call it an Outlaw Mud Show, maybe they'll come and give us their $10. Or they say, well, we could advertise these wrestling matches, but let's face it. Again, everybody on the card that we've got, because we have no money and we can't afford to pay them, either that or they're just desperate for work. They're all candidates for the Federal Witness Protection Program. These people, nobody knows who they are. So we can sell more tickets to our show if we just advertise, hey, all you sad sacks of shit that can't stand Jim Cornette, come pay me $10 and we can all sit around and bitch about him together. And that way they don't even have to set up a ring, Brian. It's a lot more cost effective that way. So I'm glad to know that I'm still keeping the wrestling business properly afloat and in business just on the strength of the threat of my name alone. He might show up. Gets people to come in droves. Or come in their pants, one or the other. It's amazing.
Just keeps happening over and over. Mr. Irrelevant. Can't stay out of everyone's mouth.
Can't stay out. I can't stay out of any of these people's mouths, Brian. They're all wanting me to come back and get in their mouth again.
Hey, I don't know if this is going to come up later in the review, so I'll ask it now just in case. During the Young Bucks match, did you hear what Excalibur called them at one point? A nickname he used?
Well, I will explain more in the review.
Okay.
But I will say I will. We don't have to blow off your question now. I was hipped to it on Twitter, as the young folks say, when somebody mentioned it. So that's how I knew that it happened. Old Excrement called Pieface Pieface. Was it a slip, or do you think he did it on purpose? Do you think there's heat there? What's going on?
Well, I just love that, again, you're Mr. Irrelevant. I have heard on AEW TV from their own commentators, I have heard Pieface. I believe I've heard Kenny Olivier a few times.
So one of the fans definitely screamed it during his big championship match.
I'm pretty sure Jim Ross has said it in the past.
I think he did. I think he went into it and kind of trailed off the A. And there was, of course, the Outlaw Mud Show placards in the street fight.
That's right. That's right. A tribute to you.
Yes. And, well, and all the things that we mention every week that they adjust on their programming after we mention it or mock it, as the case may be. But anyway, I am going to talk to Steven, though, because even though Jim Cornette is trademarked, the Cornette face is trademarked now, and Thank You, Fuck You, Bye is trademarked, Midnight Express is trademarked, all this stuff, I'm thinking about leasing these out. Because I'm thinking it would save these outlaw promoters a lot of money if instead of putting together these cards of 10 million wrestling matches between these skinny, putrid, knuckle-dragging, tongue-hanging out fucking meth heads that they find and scoop up on these outlaw shows and throw them in the ring to beat each other up and nobody cares, just advertise, we are going to bitch about Jim Cornette for 2 hours. Admission, $10. You'll have to turn them away. And I'll lease the Jim Cornette name for them to advertise for the low, low price of only $7 a head. So they can keep $3 a ticket. Brian, do you think that's fair?
I think you finally have hit on something. The more I think about it, this is a great idea. The idea we could license out the ability for people to set up their own anti-Cornette meetings where they can get together and vent about Jim Cornette, maybe buy some anti-Jim Cornette merchandise that you can find at JimCornette.com.
Well, shit,
I like this.
I don't have time for the demand for the merchandise from people who like me. I don't have time to keep up with it. I'm going to start selling the stuff to the people who... How about this? Cameos. But we'll do reverse cameos, where you can pay $250 and do a promo cussing me out, and I have to watch it. Because I think that now we might have something there. If you said to some of these, you know, basement-dwelling, subhuman, gum-bumping sacks of snake feces, you can cuss Jim Cornette out and he's going to hear it personally for $250, I bet they'd jump on it. We need to do reverse cameo.
I like this. Cut a cameo on Jim. Cut a promo on Jim.
Cut a cameo on Cornette and put him in a coma. Speaking of cameos, how'd you like that segue? We're right there in the wheelhouse. The Great American Cameo Bash is going to take place on Sunday, July 11th, where once again, I'm doing the cameos and giving a stern talking to and a dressing down, if you will, to you or whoever you designate me to. I will say anything as long as it's not illegal and could possibly come back to haunt me in a court of law. And we've announced the problems before with them selling out so quick. A lot of people were rushing, not getting the information to me because they're rushing, they're panicked, they're going to get left out. We're bringing that all to an end. That's why it's the Great American Cameo Bash. We're not limiting the number this time, folks. At noon Eastern on Sunday, July 11th, at cameo.com/Jim Cornette, the cameos go up on sale, and they will be on sale for 2 hours. I've already cleared the days with Hotchkiss that week. Whatever we sell, we'll be able to fulfill in 2 hours. After that, you're still fucked. But anyway, so you can take some time and give me some information on the people that need a talking to. That's Sunday, July 11th at noon Eastern for 2 hours. And also, if you've got any leftover cryptocurrency laying around in your little wallets, wherever you keep them, the NFTs from the folks at Rarities are still on sale and or bid. They went on sale on Sunday, June 27th, and they are continuing to be on sale. The bidding for those top tier levels 1 and 2, which includes the unique Cornette face and the signature series and a ring-worn outfit, still will be underway until this coming Sunday, July the 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern. But you go for the whole 9 yards to ProWrestlingNFT.com. And remember, you need the cryptocurrency and the instructions, as I've been getting feedback that many people need these. The instructions for how to turn your good old-fashioned money into this newfangled money are on the website as well. And that's what I've got to say about that.
Well, that's the news, Jim, on the Great American Cameo Bash. Of course, your gardener and my gardener have made cameos during this show. You can hear some of the noise in the background.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I just saw, because, you know, the Monroe brothers are here laying creekstone for me. But then the Fertitta brothers, they're the ones that do my landscaping. They came in, and just as they're mowing the grass, the Monroe brothers are trying to eat lunch, and they blew all the grass on the Monroe brothers pizza, and I think there's going to be a big fight. But go ahead.
The Fertitta brothers.
They're the landscapers.
Do they have, like, an assistant named Dana?
As a matter of fact, she's the secretary.
She? I got it. Okay.
Yeah, Dana Fertitta.
All right, well, as I was saying, speaking of cameos, and actually not speaking of cameos at all, but Cameron Seaman has been...
Wait a minute.
A topic that many people have been talking about.
Cameron Seaman.
What's his name?
Canyon Seaman.
Oh, whatever his name is. Canyon Seaman. Well, now the transition doesn't work at all.
Cameron is his middle name. Cameron Seaman.
Well, the point is, everyone hates him and he's still there. But let's go to the news. What's going on, Jim, in the world of... Every week on the show now, it's an update about WWE releases.
He's not been fired. That's the point. Canyon Seaman has not been fired. And in other news, Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still dead. The news went around, made a big stir here. It was reported by Uncle Dave, who had to retract this. Thank goodness our friends at PW Insider require double sourcing for their rumors that they hear, and they could not double source it, therefore they did not report it, and therefore they did not have to wipe the chicken embryo off of their face when it was found to be not true. But Canyon Seaman, the talent relations whiz, and I say that because everybody that's been a talent since he's been in relations would like to whiz on him, as was not fired as was rumored. There were a few other office employees that were let. No more wrestlers this week, right? The sword of Damocles is still hanging above their head. Look that one up, kids. Google it. Still hanging above their heads, but a few more of the office employees got let go, but Canyon Seaman was not amongst them. And they had to retract that story, so...
I feel so bad for Dr. Tom.
Well, I was about to say, Dr. Tom had put it best when he tweeted, I got some good news this morning, karma's a bitch, blah, 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 because, I mean, it's not a secret that everybody dislikes Canyon Seaman. The former, what was he, a volleyball pro?
I think so.
And I remember that, I can't remember when they hired him chronologically, but I remember that Danny Davis, my old partner in OVW, told me that they hired someone in the WWE office named Canyon Seaman, and I bust out laughing because you can imagine every single wrestler in that locker room wanting to make a Seaman joke, and this guy's their new boss, right? How can this be? And apparently they got him from the world of, as we mentioned, professional volleyball. So naturally, when you're a professional volleyball player, the first thing that you need to do is transition into becoming a fucking talent relations executive for a wrestling company. And he's made real serious impressions on almost everybody, but he didn't get fired. It was almost like they had announced my premature death. Jubilation, fireworks were going off, cakes were being baked, but yet it was drawn, a fuck finish, a swerve, reversal. Referee reversed his decision. Maybe it's still a matter of time. Who knows? But they didn't fire anybody when Vince went to the Performance Center, so that's good. They said they brought the whole Hee-Haw gang, Vince McMahon, Nick Khan, John Laurinaitis, and the Artful Dodger. Went to the Performance Center and talked to everybody and didn't fire anybody. So I stand by my statement that I made on, what was the last show we did? This is the experience on the drive-thru, that Vince is pissed off, and he went to the fucking Performance Center. He went out in the garden to see what vegetables are ready to be picked, and he brought along his Aunt Fanny that does the cannon and of the preserves, and he brought along his brother-in-law that does the barbecue, and all of his chefs, and he's going to find some new ingredients, and he's going to make a new stew.
He brought along his own personal Baghdad Bob, the propaganda chief, of course.
Are you, wait, Baghdad Bob or Sideshow Bob? Which Bob are we talking about?
Kind of a mix of the two now that you think about it. What a brilliant question you just asked. I never even thought about that. But kind of a mix of the two.
Anyway, so just to bring you up to date, Canyon Seaman, not fired. Generalissimo Francisco Franco, still dead. But in other news, of people who some people actually called, are you going to fire him? People were asking if they were going to fire Jim Ross for slipping and pitching out last Wednesday night with WWE Dynamite. I mean, it was probably not a fortunate placement. Many people mentioned, well, muscle memory. He's done that, WWE for many thousands of times over decades and decades on television, but my DVR cut it off. It cut off the last line because it was what a go home line. It was. I bet you everybody in the truck just flipped their shit up in the air like, oh shit, we almost got by with this one without tanking ourselves too bad. But he slipped and said WWE Dynamite, and people are, is Tony Khan gonna fire him? Fuck. If Tony Khan doesn't fire people for committing felonious assault on his television program for real every week and somebody gets carried out constantly, I don't think he's going to fire an announcer for slipping up and getting one of the letters wrong. He got the W.
Oh, come on.
He got the E.
That's no way to defend this.
He just didn't get the A.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
2 W's instead of an A and a W. That was all the difference. What do you think, Brian?
I think, like you said, the placement of it being the last thing you hear on the show, that's... I mean, I can see Tony Khan sitting there just hitting himself in the head as he's going off the air. And I'm not saying that as a shot at Tony Khan. I mean, I could just see the frustration. But, you know, I'm not a Jim Ross defender, and I've hit him hard for things in the past, and I've hit him hard for sloppy work, I thought, in the past. But some of these things, it feels like there are people just ready to jump on him for anything. And unfortunately, he has slipped up a few times recently, and it's benign. It's nothing, like, awful. It's not like he's just yelling pussy on TV or anything. You know, but he slips up, and every now and then he gets a name slightly wrong.
Wait a minute. See, that should have been a thing that Shitstain and old Cornrow Ferrara should have come up with. Give Jim Ross Tourette's. They tried every other way to embarrass him and humiliate him. Give him Tourette's, and he'd come out, piss out my ass!
But there are people waiting to jump on Jim Ross. And, I mean, a couple weeks ago, when Jungle Boy had the match with Omega, at one point they showed Jungle Boy's family in the crowd. He even referenced it. He said, there's his, I think, mother and sister. I may be wrong, though. Don't jump on me, or whatever he said, because he's gotten some things wrong lately. But it's relatively benign. And I think that there are AEW fans who don't like him on the commentating team.
Well, and
I also think
he made a horrible statement in not anointing Kenny Olivier as the greatest wrestler in the world right off the top of his head a couple weeks ago.
Well, that's the other thing. There's somewhat of an element, let me phrase this very carefully. There's somewhat of an element inside of the company, and I think that based on the knowledge of that, there are some people who are hardcore fans who go with it now, but there's an element inside the company that don't want Jim Ross there, that don't like Jim Ross. They think that Jim Ross not going the full Cornette, but also not going the full Meltzer on the Young Bucks, whoever it may be, that's a problem. Some of the comments in the past, remember when Brandon Cutler fired up at him on Twitter? He doesn't do that if the Bucks don't say go do that.
Well, yeah.
You see instances like this where AEW talent itself kind of fires back at Jim Ross, and I think he's in a kind of weird situation now where you have an element that doesn't want him there.
And that element is the people that do the shit that makes him have to do the verbal eye roll that he does every once in a while when it's like, you expect me to talk about what you are doing here when this is falling apart, makes no sense, something's fucking up. And instead of trying to work on not burying your announcers having to call or talk about stupid shit, now let's get rid of the most famous announcer in the history of the world, because he would actually want us to do wrestling that might be logical so that he wouldn't be embarrassed to talk about it. But anyway.
But again, it's to my main point.
Yeah.
It's relatively benign. Leave him alone about this. He said WWE at the end. I don't go for the muscle memory thing just because he has said WWE thousands and maybe even more than that amount of times. He's never said WWE Dynamite. It wasn't like he said, we'll see you next week on Raw. But again, who gives a shit? In the whole scheme of things of problems in AEW, Jim Ross is the least of the... He's the least of the problems on commentary, let alone the least of the problems in the company. That's my 2 cents. What do you...
Boy, well, as a matter of fact, you said it very well. He's the least of the problems they have on commentary, much less the problems they have other places that go much deeper. They're announcing, except for an excrement, isn't even as markish sounding as he used to be. He's just such a sop, and the gimmick is so ridiculous to look at.
But it's the way he talks. It's the way he says everything on the show. It's just that.
Well, that's because now he sees a Mark trying to act like an announcer. But if they were serious, as I said 2 years ago, if they were serious about doing a serious television program and having an announce crew that people would actually listen to, they would take the unknown fucking goof who still lives in the glory of when he was a fucking part-time wrestler in front of 400 people in a barn somewhere outside Cucamonga, and it'd say, if you're going to be the announcer, take the mask off because nobody's ever fucking heard of you, and we're going to give you a actual real person's name, whether it's yours or someone else's, but it'll be a first name and a last name, and you're going to be an announcer. And don't ever talk about ever trying to be a wrestler, because you weren't, really, and nobody gives a shit. That would be addressing the biggest problem on commentary.
That advice right there is something I call Cornet Driver 98!
Yeah! And when that's what he said the Tiger Driver 98! A guy is doing it that is not affiliated in any way with Tigers or Tiger Mask or Tiger King or Tony
drivers.
Tiger.
Or drivers.
Or drivers, anywhere. He's not even using his left and right turn indicator. Just say, oh my God, he's trying to break his neck. He dropped him on his head. That's good enough. Anyway, that's just a piece of news. Have you heard about the other piece of news? This is sad news for anybody who wants legitimacy to the WWE Hall of Fame, who wants it to really truly represent all the greats in wrestling. A blow was struck just this past week when it was announced, ladies and gentlemen, by one Vincent Russo, that if nominated, he will not run. If elected, he will not serve in the WWE Hall of Fame. No, he would not accept that invitation. He does not need validation for his work by Vince McMahon. He just needs to be validated by his wife and his kids and his family and his close personal friends. And if they ain't gonna goddamn vote for him to be in the WWE Hall of Fame, then he's not gonna take it. Can you believe that? In related news, ladies and gentlemen, I have also gone on record as saying I will not accept an induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the National Football League Hall of Fame, the UFC Hall of Fame, or any other Hall of Fame that I'm not qualified to be in. Shock and amazement. What the is he off his meds again?
So I missed this. He just randomly announced that he will never accept. I mean, did he get an invitation from anyone?
Well, no, no. That's the point. He in some interview he did with some person who needed somebody to talk to, I don't know, he let them know that no, I don't need that validation from Vince. If I was asked, I will not accept it. Well, good, because you're fucking safe. You are safe. You are safe at home. You're safe as in you if you were in your mother's bosom, pal, because that invitation is not coming. And I know a lot of people are going to say, wow, Cornette, they're not going to put you in there either. No, they're not. Not because of the fact that I don't deserve to be in, since the bar is still fairly low about the WWE Hall of Fame once you get into the mid-card and the celebrity wing, but the fact that I say too much shit and people listen to it and they don't want to go through that can of peas. But I've said before, if they wanted to induct me in the Midnight Express, I would accept, because I would not screw up the boys' opportunity, but that I wouldn't accept even if they asked me without the Midnight Express, because I didn't do anything Hall of Fame worthy in my mind. In the WWF, my Hall of Fame shit comes from managing the Midnight Express. But they don't even nominate. Pat Patterson was in for being a great wrestler and for being an announcer to the WWE public, WWF public, and for being a driving force behind it, but they didn't come out and say he was a fucking writer. They don't put writers in the Hall of... They don't put bat boys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Where is it? Up in Cooperstown? You're a big
That is
baseball
correct.
fan.
Of course, it's in Cooperstown.
How many bat boys are in the Hall of Fame?
I do not believe there are any bat boys in the Hall of Fame. There's some famous bat boys like MC Hammer, but none in the Hall of Fame.
Okay, well, there you go. So maybe, I guess what he's doing is he's making a preemptive strike, Shitstain is. If they ever come up with the bat boy equivalent of a WWE Hall of Fame slot, he's turning it down right now. Kid, he's delusional. He's delusional.
I mean, don't you just think it's a kind of a cry for attention or valid? I mean, he says he doesn't need the validation. It comes across.
That's where you know he needs the validation.
Yeah, that's the way it comes
that
across.
He would consider that in any way he had ever done anything that would qualify him to be involved in the as low as that standard is these days, to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He's batshit fucking nuts. He's as bull. Somebody needs to check on him. I wonder if he can find his way home at night these days.